Hi everyone, my name is Sue. In today's video, I would like to talk about how to configure a page for users to log in, also how to verify users' login credential. If you are new to PEGA and have some questions related to this topic, hopefully this video will help you with your project. So I've already created a data type. I named it customer. As you can see here, I've also added username, password, and some other related properties here. Also inserted some random instances. Okay, so let's go back to our work data flow. The first step would be let user to log in. And what we do here is to create a field. I name it login credential. And because we're grouping username and a password together, we're grouping two properties into one. So we want that one property type to be field group. And because we have already created customer data type, we don't need another one. That's why I put customer there. Okay, let's open our customer. As you can see here, it has all the properties we created for the customer, but because we don't need the rest of them, we just want the username and the password to appear on the first page, so I delete the unrelated ones. Let's save it. Let's go ahead and run this case. As you can see on the screen, this is exactly what we're looking for. Username and password, where customers can insert their information as a login credential. Let's say, for example, if the customer enter 111222 as their username and a password, what should we do next? Well, if you remember, previously I was talking about I've already inserted some instances. So our job is to compare the user input to our data instances to see if they match. In order to achieve that goal, we can use a data page list and a report definition. So a data page list is a list that contains all the instances from our record. And a report definition is similar to SQL, which help us to do the matching job. So I'm going to explain how this happens step by step. Okay, first thing first, what is SQL? SQL is used to communicate with database, which is our table and the instances. I like you to think SQL this way. You use SQL to select something from a table where a condition is true. For example, when A equals to B. And the most important thing is the last part, the condition part. Our report definition is really basically talking about the condition. So in our case, the condition is we want to compare the user input to the records. Okay, for example, if this is our report definition, Let's see what we need to do in this report definition. Because we're comparing the user input to the record, so of course we have to pass in some parameters, which is the user input. Because like what I mentioned before, report definition is focusing on the condition, which I like to interpret it as when A equals to B. So in our case, we have to think what is the A and what is the B. Since we're comparing the user's input, the username password, to the record, which is also the username and the password. Our first condition would be to compare the username from the record or the page list to the parameter we passed in, which is the user input. And we want to do the same thing to our password, which is our second condition. If both condition 1 and 2 are true, that means PEGA can find a matching username and a password according to the user input. In that case, PEGA will return some sort of result. So when they're both true, our PX result count should never be 0. That's the logic behind data page list and a report definition. Let's take a look at PEGA, see how we can actually implement what we just talking about. Okay, let's go ahead create a new data page list. I am going to call it verify credential list. And under the data source, you can see the report definition. Instead of use the default one, we are going to create a new report definition. And normally this is how I do it. I want to do save as. And I'm going to name it so report definition, and click create and open. Okay, so the first condition is to compare the username from our data record, which if you remember, let's go back to our customer data type, and you can see here the ID for username is username with a capital U. This is one thing you have to pay attention to, because if you create a field with two separate words with a space in between, PEGA actually automatically capitalize the first letter of both words. So we don't want that confusion to happen to our case. Let me just stick with the username with one capitalized letter. And that would be our column source. And if you want to double check, this is another way. You can see up there. So for the value, it's going to be our user input. And how do PEGA know what value is going to be passed in? Well, PEGA knows through our parameter. So we want to create a parameter named username. and the data type is text. Now if we go back to our condition, we can actually see our parameter .username. And let's do the same thing to password. Make sure the letter is correct. Also create a parameter for password. And you also want to make sure the data type is correct. If you put int here or other, it won't work. Alrighty, that's it. That's all the configuration for report definition. The next step would be go back to our data page list and put our report definition under the data source. Now we can save it. So far, we have created report definition and complete the two conditions. Now our job is to make sure the PX result count works. And how do we configure that? Well, we have to go to the flow action. You need to open process first and then click the flow action, which is connector, and go to validation. Now I'm going to create a validation rule called validate user input. The property is easy. You're just gonna use the name of the property you're going to test. I'm gonna use the login credential username. Here comes the tricky part, the condition. Because it's not something that PEGA provide us, we have to use the when the expression is true and configure our own expression. When I first tried to create this validation rule, I could not understand what this means, the format. I know we have this data page list, but I didn't understand what should I put in this bracket. That's one of the reasons I wanted to create this channel for PEGA beginners to help each other out. To better explain what's going on within this bracket, I'm going to make it simplify. Let's say A semicolon B. And I wanted to explain what does A represent and what does B represent. So A is always going to be the property's name in your data page list, which is your column source. So you can go back to your verified credential list and check the property name. Mine was username. And the B represents your property under your work case. So mine is under login credential username. Now that we know what should we put in the bracket, we can make this expression work. The verify credential list bracket username is from our data record, semicolon, and be careful with this dot here. If you don't have it, PEGA won't let you pass this validation rule. And of course, we do the same thing to the password. Once PEGA can find a matching, it's going to return the number of how many results PEGA find. In this case, if they find 0, we're going to return error message. I hope that makes sense. Okay, now we just need to copy the expression and paste over here. And there's one more thing I wanted to mention is the property name. It has to be exactly the same. Otherwise, you will run into this issue. PEGA will say, I don't recognize the user name with a capital N. So if you have an error looks like this, double check with your property name and see if you can figure out if it's an uppercase or lowercase. Now you want to edit your message, say what do you want to tell the user to do if the PX result count equals to 0. Okay, let's submit it and save this validation rule. Okay, we run into 2 other issues. We can fix the first one easily. Just specify which data page are we referring to. Okay, it is the D underscore verify credential list. It is saying that our data page list doesn't take parameter. So let's open our data page list and go to parameter. Okay, so this is why we haven't put the parameter here. That's why in our validation rule, they can't recognize the username and the password. Now we are making a connection between report definition and the data page list. Once we save that, the error should go away. Okay. I believe that's all we need to do. We can now go ahead and test if this case works. Go ahead, close that tab and submit and save everything. Alright, let's go ahead, create a case. Okay, so the first I want to test if both wrong. See, it won't let us to pass to the next stage. Oh, okay, here, I don't want the error to show underneath the username. I want it to show underneath the password. And you just need to simply change the property from username to password. Let's go back and try again. As you can see, this time when I put a wrong username password there, the error message show underneath the password. Okay, now we want to try using the correct username and password to log in. AAA and a BBB. Okay, go back and put the correct username password there, submit. Congrats, you made it.